to bring in Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Tony Sayegh. Tony, good to see you.
Good morning, Maria. How are you?
Good. Reactions to last night?
Listen, it was a dominant night for Donald Trump. It's exactly what he needed after a very mediocre Saturday where he lost many states to Ted Cruz, underperformed in Louisiana and Kentucky, even though winning by much less, though, than was expected. He was in double-digit leads, and he ended up winning by 4. Cruz, though, emerges from last night with a very important development, which is the near-fatal blow to Marco Rubio's campaign. And if Rubio ends up dropping out prior to Florida as a result of those poor showings last night, it becomes a very pivotal moment where Cruz emerges as the true anti-Trump candidate, and you're going to have to see who backs him up. I mean, is the establishment going to go behind a guy they've been very reluctant to align themselves with thus far?
Doesn't it feel like that's happening already, though? I mean, you know, even if Marco Rubio goes into Florida and perhaps loses Florida.
Well, look, then it's over for Marco Rubio in that case. I think there's a very active conversation on whether or not Rubio stays in this race even prior to March 15th. That being said, I think Donald Trump was making real gains with what we call the establishment. These are mainly traditional Republican leaders, party hierarchy, and donors, right? But then the KKK controversy happened, and you saw them all stop and do an about-face away from Donald Trump, those at least who were beginning to warm up to him. Now the only place they have to go is Ted Cruz, and as a mark of that, Maria, guess who just signed on board Ted Cruz's campaign? Neil Bush. George W. Bush and Jeb Bush's brother. So clearly you're going to see a lot of people who want to stop Trump finding that Cruz is their real only alternative to do so.
Can Cruz win the general election?
Well, look, if you believe the national polls, I don't tend to believe them this early, though, to be very candid with you. He's well-positioned. He certainly could. And on the flip of that is Hillary Clinton. And, you know, you see what happened last night to her in Michigan, in a blue-collar state where she lost working-class whites. She lost people who cared about the economy, cared about trade and jobs. She lost people who cared about empathy and honesty. This is a problem for her, not just in a primary, but certainly well beyond. So when you look at the general election matchup against anyone on the right with Hillary, you have to see the fatality of her character weaknesses as possibly influencing the outcome there.
Tony, if you're going to put logs in front of the Trump train, you have to stop him from winning Florida. And Kasich didn't have the best showing in Michigan. And you have to stop him from winning Ohio. What do you think are the odds that Rubio gets out of the way before Florida? And would that even matter?
Yeah, it does matter, Dagan, to some degree, although I think you're putting your finger on the conversation everybody is having this morning, which is how much longer does Marco Rubio last? And, you know, Florida is now his last stand, if he even lasts that long. I think Trump right now is in a dominant, as I said earlier, position, because if you look at the map going forward, even if Kasich won Ohio, let's pretend that happened, where does he go after that? Where does he take that message? You have the northeastern states in April. They're very pro-Trump territory. Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. Donald Trump has been able to do something many other Republican candidates have not, which is have wins all over the country, not just regionalized. So unless Ted Cruz somehow galvanizes the establishment behind him in a meaningful way, it's very hard to foresee how you stop Donald Trump at this point.
But don't you see, I mean, we just saw some interviews from voters coming out and saying, you know, I'm not sure if it was Rubio, if it was Cruz. It just seemed like maybe I should vote for Cruz so that it wasn't Trump. I mean, the support for Cruz seems to be soft. You know, there's very few people that I've spoken with that are like, I am all in for Cruz. And that makes it really hard to think that he's going to be the candidate, because when you talk to Trump supporters, they are rabid. They are all in. And it's hard to break that kind of momentum. So what do you think?
Look, when you look at intensity and enthusiasm, you could come up with a million theories, or you could state the obvious. It's Donald Trump who's really galvanizing people, and in some cases, galvanizing voters to come out in the Republican primaries and vote against him. Don't forget, we now are going into many closed contests. Trump is not going to be able to appeal to the independent voter in some of these upcoming primaries, so Cruz tends to have slight advantage there. But look, there's an argument to be made that it's kind of too little too late to stop him. If this was going to happen, it had to happen early. Cruz should have done much better on Super Tuesday if you were going to take the delegate math away from Donald Trump. And at this point, you know, barring a major sea change, which still can happen, and we've seen crazier things happen, it's hard to imagine how Donald Trump does get, as Dagan said, derailed by the log on the rail. Although, look, Cruz is smart. He's savvy. He's beginning to really, I think, make some smart hires and moves. He's adding field offices in Florida refocusing a lot of his attention down there. If he's able, look, one or two upsets in some of these big winner-take-all states could change this race. But as of today, it looks like a very good path forward for Donald Trump.
Yeah, and it does feel like Trump beat down the establishment. I mean, they threw everything at him. Romney last week.
This is a stat, and Tony can react to this. This is a stat that was in the Wall Street Journal. In the first week of February, 9% of all GOP ads targeted Trump. At the start of March, half targeted him. Half. He's been bombarded with half the advertisements out there against him. These are GOP ads. And have we really even seen a dent in the campaign because of it?
Listen, I mean, most of us who grew up in New York in the 90s, in the era of John Gotti, remember the headline, Teflon Don. I think it could certainly be reapplied here.
Right, Teflon Don, I remember.
It certainly could be reapplied in a political context. And the reason is because people like his authenticity. It's amazing how much Donald Trump is able to get away with that the traditional structural candidate cannot. Inconsistencies in his record, odd temperament, you know, heckling a press journalist at his own press conference. But people have, at this point, concluded that basically everybody's rotten in the establishment system on both sides, Hillary Clinton and Democratic establishment interests and the Jeb Bush and Republican establishment interests. They see Donald Trump as refreshing. So it's very hard to be convinced by Mitt Romney and others that somehow he's disqualified to be president because the establishment doesn't like him.
You're right.
And you see him surging ahead of that pack.
It's all showing that. Tony, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
We'll see you soon, sir. Tony Sayegh there. Before we